Hello, this is Aram Hamparian speaking to you today from the ANCA National Headquarters in Washington, D.C. Wanted to spend some time with you today going over our advocacy priorities for the coming session of Congress for the new Trump administration. It's an exciting time, one of many challenges, but also a lot of new opportunities. Our community took a robust interest in this last election, and now we have the results of that election. We're gonna get to work. From the left, from the right, wherever we stood as individuals, we certainly are united as Armenians in working for strength and viability and security and justice and peace for the Armenian people. So what I want to do today is go over a bit of our agenda. I have some slides that may be helpful to you, and I'll put them on the screen in just a second. But let me get all caffeined up here, and we will dig right in. This is a bit of a deep dive. I recognize that short form videos are very often more compelling, and there's a lot of folks who kind of like want to sort of get their meals in small bites. But there's others of us who are a little bit wonkish and want a little more attention to detail, and I think that's what today's going to be about. So let's move over here to our first screen, and that is the subject of the Armenian genocide, which for us is an advocacy priority, not because of the nature of what happened more than 100 years ago, but because of the viability challenges, the security challenges that the contemporary implications of that crime continue to impose upon the Armenian nation. So, what are we looking for? What is our goal here? We are looking for a break with many decades of U.S. complicity in Turkey's denial of the Armenian genocide. We know that the U.S. has at times been on the right side of this issue. We know that the Eisenhower administration, in writing to the International Court, cited the Armenian genocide as a known case of genocide, as an example of the very types of crimes that the Genocide Convention and international law is meant to prevent and punish. So the Eisenhower administration was on the right side. Several decades later, 3 decades later, the Reagan administration, President Reagan in his proclamation of 1981 spoke about the Armenian genocide. It was a speech about the Holocaust, but he cited the Armenian genocide and the Cambodian genocide as other cases, known cases of genocide. Unfortunately, though, since 1981, presidents have played word games, done verbal gymnastics, used evasive and euphemistic terminology to avoid saying Armenian genocide. And the answer as to why is very simple. It's simply not to offend Turkey. It's a very clear case of Turkey enforcing a gag rule against America. American presidents having their own voice, their own stance on human rights vetoed by a foreign country. In a sense, it's an outsourcing of U.S. policy, even U.S. morality, to another country, and in this case, a country that with a terrible record on freedom of expression and human rights itself, the government of Turkey. So we want a U.S. policy that isn't just about one word or one time, but rather a U.S. policy that recognizes the Armenian genocide, but because it is seeking the remedies for that crime. And that remedy begins here at home with an end to complicity in Turkey's denials. It extends to Turkey, where Turkey needs to come to grips with its own history and reckon with its own responsibilities with regard to the Armenian genocide in a way that will lead to justice, but also in a way that will lead to a better Turkey, a more tolerant, pluralist, and democratic Turkey. These are things that will help make put America on the right side of the issue, eventually Turkey on the right side of the issue, and ultimately make Armenia more secure. If there are going to be improved relations between Turks and Armenians, between Turkey and Armenia, it's not going to be developed, those relations are not going to be developed around the recognition of the Armenian genocide, very much the central issue, outstanding issue between these two societies, but rather because that issue has been tackled head on. Turkey has come to grips with it in much the same way that America has grappled with the legacy of slavery, even in many ways the treatment of Native Americans. Certainly the German example with regard to the Holocaust holds great meaning. There's been other efforts in South Africa where in sort of the post-apartheid era, the ruling elites came to grips with what exactly they had done and what they were guilty for. This is the type of future we envision. We're not there yet, and Turkey's able to sustain its denials in large measure because the U.S. has their back on this policy. Of course, we're sending off President Obama after 8 years of essentially not following through on his pledge on this issue, which was something that we all deeply regret and is ultimately a very, very poor reflection of his leadership, certainly on this issue. So what are the benefits? What are the benefits of a U.S. policy that deals honestly with the Armenian genocide? For example, President Trump, for example, that speaks honestly on the Armenian genocide on April 24th or even before. Or the U.S. Congress passing legislation that speaks to this issue and its implications and its consequences and its remedies, in a new and powerful way, a resolution on the genocide perhaps, or some other legislative vehicle that puts the Congress on record and breaks with this history. That would put America on the right side, and I think that would strengthen our standing as a force for genocide prevention in the world. It would certainly make the world a safer place. The international community is, in many ways, a much more dangerous place by virtue of Turkey's example of a genocide committed and consolidated and denied with impunity. That example is a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous precedent. It makes other genocides more likely. So putting America on the right side of this issue would strengthen U.S. leadership and also generally the genocide prevention movement worldwide. There would be immediate benefits to Armenia as well. The very fact that Turkey remains on Armenia's border as an unrepentant, overarmed, and very aggressive perpetrator of genocide, one that blockades Armenia, one that aids Azerbaijan, this represents an existential threat to the Armenian people. Turkey acknowledging this history, backing away from its denials, accepting its responsibilities, would be a step toward an improved relationship between Turks and Armenians, and also a meaningful step toward Armenia having a more secure place in that region of the world. There are benefits as well to Turkey. Turkey is unfortunately a country that has not dealt constructively with the Armenians or the Assyrians or the Greeks or the Cypriots, certainly, the 1974 invasion, with the Kurds and the Yazidis today. We see that there's open warfare against the Kurdish minority in the country. All these problems that Turkey's faced, they've not tried to solve through dialogue and discussion, but rather through violence and in many cases genocide. A Turkey that is able to acknowledge that and move beyond that to a more pluralist future would be a good future for Turkey's citizens and certainly for Turkey's neighbors as well. And as I mentioned, if there's going to be an improvement in relations between Turks and Armenians, it's going to be based upon an honest reckoning with the Armenian genocide. So for all these reasons, we're going to work very hard. We're going to turn to you for your support time and time again in these coming 2 years. But we like to see and very much believe it's necessary for America to break with this terrible pattern of complicity in Turkey's denials. That doesn't mean, as I said before, it's not just one word, it's not just one time. It is a sustained U.S. policy as reflected in statements and as symbolized by words, but ultimately a sustained U.S. policy that is based upon the truth and that calls upon Turkey to end its denials and ultimately calls upon the Armenians and Turks to resolve any issues that remain outstanding and to build a better future based upon the truth and based upon a just resolution of the Armenian genocide. So that's a look at our genocide agenda. Obviously, it's a very complex agenda. It takes place in the U.S. Congress, with the White House, in the U.S. media, at the U.S. state level. We're now, about 44 U.S. states, I think, now have recognized this crime as a genocide. It's a very diverse issue, a lot of different dimensions. The movie, The Promise, it will be coming out in late April of this year, a production funded by the late Kirk Kerkorian, put together by Eric Ezralian and many other excellent producers, and also Mike Medavoy, who joined him as a producer, and Terry George, a great director of Hotel Rwanda. So there's obviously an advocacy component to it, a media component to it, a state level component, grassroots component, coalition component, and also an arts component, sort of a Hollywood angle to this as well. But we'll be pursuing all of those, and it'll be a full court press, certainly through the first part of 2017. Let me turn now to Artsakh, and we obviously want to see let me bring this down a page. We have support for peace in Artsakh. Very high on this agenda is strengthening the 1994 ceasefire. That's the ceasefire that was negotiated with the participation of all three parties, Armenia, Artsakh, and Azerbaijan. That's the key in so many ways. Nothing is really possible. Peace is not possible. A resolution is not possible. Regional integration that might follow is not possible if there is no peace on the ground. There's not going to be a resolution. There's not going to be talks. There's not going to be any progress in the dialogue between the various parties if Azerbaijan is shooting in a hot war against Armenia and Artsakh. And unfortunately, that's exactly what they're doing. So the most urgent priority for our community and for the U.S. and for our other OSCE Minsk Group partners is to keep the peace. To keep the peace. Here in the U.S., the focus has been on the Royce-Engel proposals. That's a measure, rather a set of proposals put forward by the chairman and ranking Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. That's Chairman Ed Royce and ranking member Eliot Engel of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Back about a year and a half now, they put forth these proposals. They are a set of three concrete initiatives. One is the addition of observers to the line of contact, more OSCE observers with eyes and ears checking out what's going on along the borderlines. Second, an agreement not to deploy snipers or heavy arms along the line of contact between Artsakh and Azerbaijan, and that would hopefully lead to a de-escalation, less incidents, less major attacks either by tanks or artillery or by helicopters or certainly by snipers. So an agreement on the non-deployment of snipers and heavy arms would be very constructive. And the third element, very compelling on so many levels, is the deployment of gunfire locator systems. These are these high-tech devices that you deploy along the line of contact, and when a shot is fired, these machines can detect where the shot came from, where it was headed, and the type of ordnance or caliber of weapon that was used to initiate the attack. And this helps hold the belligerent party, the one initiating the attack, to account. And it leads to accountability, which we think is the key to a restoration of stability and a respect for the ceasefire. That's the good news, that these Royce-Engel proposals have been put forward, and Armenia has endorsed them, as has Artsakh. Our government, the U.S. government, and our State Department has backed them as well. The OSCE supports investigative mechanisms. That's the good news. The bad news is that Azerbaijan has rejected them, and they have in fact obstructed their implementation. Azerbaijan will, in the same breath, say that they're not guilty of infractions of the ceasefire, violations of the ceasefire, and in the very next sentence say, and we don't want investigative mechanisms to determine who might have committed those abuses. That alone is, should be sufficient for any reasonable person, any reasonable ninth grader to conclude that it's Azerbaijan that's starting these attacks. They have the motive to initiate these attacks. They are the party that rejects the current status quo on the ground. They are the party that boasts of launching new attacks, and they are the party that rejects initiatives that would hold them to account for the actions that they're taking. So keeping the ceasefire in place is essential, and the Royce-Engel proposals will pursue in this current session of Congress. We thank Chairman Royce, we thank Ranking Member Engel, and all the members of Congress, I think more than 100 overall, who have worked with them to support these initiatives. We also need, more broadly, to check Azerbaijan's aggression. There is the investigative mechanisms component of that, and that's important for us, but there's other aspects of that as well. Most broadly, there's the concept of false parity, this artificial even-handedness that U.S. and OSCE mediators have employed for well over a decade now. In layman's terms, it's simply this: Azerbaijan will launch an attack. There may or may not be fatalities as a result on one side or both sides. After which, the international community calls upon both sides to refrain from violence and to respect the ceasefire. It's a transparent effort to provide cover to Azerbaijan, because everybody knows that it's Azerbaijan that has the motive to launch these attacks to upset the status quo. Everyone knows that it's Azerbaijan that is boasting of having committed these attacks, and it is Azerbaijan that rejects the mechanisms to hold them account for initiating these attacks. And yet the international community time and time again plays this game of false parity, of artificial even-handedness. And we're hoping that the OSCE and our State Department breaks with that pattern. It's not constructive, and in fact, it contributes to further violence and emboldens Azerbaijan's aggression. We're also taking a close look at military sales to Azerbaijan, especially those that have a connection to the United States. And there's one that's pending, we believe. It's been reported in the Jerusalem Post and Defense Weekly, in Haaretz, and the Azerbaijani press as well. And that's the sale of Iron Dome. It's a missile defense system by Israel to Azerbaijan. Now, these are sometimes called defensive weapons, but they're not really defensive weapons in the end, because they're the type of weapons that, if they were in the hands of Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan would feel increased confidence in launching first attacks, confident that it could defend itself against retaliation by the Armenian side, by Artsakh or Armenia, whichever may be the case. This is a weapon system that could materially shift the balance of power in the region, and one that we think is reckless in terms of regional politics, but also, as Americans, we worry that there may be U.S. law implications. Those systems were developed in Israel, but with U.S. parts and U.S. components and U.S. technology. And that means that the sale of those systems, which include U.S. parts and technology, come under U.S. export control laws. So we're looking into the legality of this now. What are the facts of the situation? What are the laws that govern the situation? And certainly we want to bring this to the attention of the relevant policymakers and ask them to review both the legality of a third-party sale of U.S. parts and technology to Azerbaijan, but also the regional implications. What will this mean for the peace process? What will it mean for stability? What will it mean for human rights in the region? So we're taking a careful look at that, along with other arms sales that are flowing into Baku. We continue to remain focused on maintaining an even level parity in U.S. military aid appropriations, the aid that Congress appropriates for Armenia and Azerbaijan for military purposes. Typically, that's foreign military financing, and IMET, which is International Military Education and Training. So that aid has annually been allocated, set by Congress at an equal level. We want to see that parity continue. And we also prioritize investigations into the violations committed by Azerbaijan, the human rights violations committed by Azerbaijan this past April during their attack into Artsakh. A very troubling aspect of this, beyond the abuses that were committed, beyond the people who were killed and mutilated and who suffered so terribly at the hands of these abuses, which included beheadings and torture. An aspect that's very relevant to us as Americans is that there's some evidence that the Azerbaijani military units that engaged in those abuses were in fact units that have received funding from the U.S. government, the very foreign military financing and IMET training that the U.S. government provides. There's some evidence that those soldiers who committed the abuses were in fact beneficiaries of U.S. assistance. As it turns out, there's a set of U.S. laws that prohibit that, and with sufficient evidence, the U.S. State Department is obliged to trigger an investigation. We continue to press for that investigation. It has not happened yet, but we will not back off from that priority. There should be a Leahy law investigation of Azerbaijan's violations during the April War. All of these efforts together are meant to strengthen the ceasefire, to check Azerbaijan's aggression. We think that is the key for the future of the region. If there is going to be a negotiated peace, it's going to be a peace that is negotiated while the ceasefire is being respected. So our hopes and our wishes for a negotiated resolution they hinge upon peace on the ground, and peace on the ground requires Azerbaijan backing off on its attacks. I say all this, and I want to sort of take a small diversion, which is to talk about the peace process. We support the peace process. The ANCA endorses the OSCE Minsk Group, which is an international group of nations that have come together to resolve the Karabakh issue. The three co-chairs of that effort are the United States, France, and Russia. They have an important responsibility here, and we support them in that effort. But the current plan they have on the table is flawed. The platform is good. The Minsk Group platform is a solid platform, but the plan itself is a very weak plan. It's called the Madrid Principles. And the Madrid Principles, how would I summarize this? basically very asymmetrical. The demands of the Armenian side are profound, and the sort of the other side of the deal, the demands of Azerbaijan are at best elusive or hard to nail down. Let me go into a little more detail. The request, the demand, the pressure on the Armenian side, especially on Artsakh, is for an upfront, means right now, upfront strategic surrender of land and security. Sometimes it's discussed as 5 territories, sometimes it's discussed as 7 territories, but in any sense, no matter how you define it, in particular, it boils down to the Minsk group calling upon Artsakh to cede vast areas of its sovereign territory, and with that, of course, very, very sort of deep attack or sort of deprivation of its security. That's the request of the Artsakh side, which is existential level, strategic level, survival level, viability level ask of Artsakh. Okay, so that's the ask. That's a heavy ask. So we have to look then, what is being asked of the other side? What is being asked of Azerbaijan? Azerbaijan is asked to promise, just, on a piece of paper perhaps. And I think as Armenians, we understand the value of pieces of paper. There have been many treaties over many, many years that have been ripped up or ignored at our expense. But the request of Azerbaijan is to promise that at some point in the future, we don't know when, to hold or to agree to an expression of will, right? Expression of will. That's the most specific language we've ever seen on paper. An expression of will regarding the future status of Artsakh. Now, we don't know, as I said, when that will take place. We don't know what an expression of will is. We assume it's some kind of vote or referendum. We don't know who will get to vote. All the citizens of Azerbaijan, all the citizens of Armenian Azerbaijan, all the citizens of Artsakh, some formula based on earlier census figures. These are all up in the air. We don't know, have any detail on the nature of who might vote. And we don't even know what they would vote upon, right? Would the question before the voters be, what degree of autonomy should Artsakh have in Azerbaijan? Or, should Azerbaijan be independent? Should it be part of Armenia? All these questions remain entirely unanswered and ultimately not just unanswered, but entirely unenforceable. So in return for a very deep and very profound surrender on the Artsakh side, there would be this promise on the Azeri side. And I think any school child could tell you that that's not a good deal, that it's simply the height of arrogance to assume that the Armenians are foolish enough to cede the very land and security and survival of Artsakh and ultimately Armenia in return for this very vague promise that Azerbaijan could walk away from the day after they are able to basically occupy Artsakh's territory. It's a very bad deal. So we are working to sustain the ceasefire. We want to see progress in the OSCE Minsk Group peace process, but we have very, very serious questions about the Madrid principles and where they stand. Now let us turn. Let me move down the list here a little bit to other regional issues. Okay, we have here a call for a review of U.S.-Turkey relations. The advent of the new Trump administration provides a good point to pivot and take a new look at U.S.-Turkey relations. A lot has changed in that relationship over the past several decades. Turkey has really gone in its own direction and has jettisoned a lot of the cooperation that the U.S. once counted upon and has in fact undermined many U.S. Policy priorities. No longer the reliable ally that they once presented themselves as. They are flagrantly and openly at odds with us on so many issues. But yet U.S. policy has lagged far behind. U.S. policy has lagged far behind. There are, for example, pending U.S. arms deals. There's an F-35 deal, a very advanced U.S. military jet that's in the works, and a sale is in the works to Azerbaijan. That would put Turkey in possession of a very, very advanced weapon system, some of the most lethal air power in the world, as a result of sort of a U.S. sale, when we don't know in what direction Turkey's heading. If Turkey's heading in the wrong direction, they should not be better armed. They should be less armed. So this could be, there could be a terrible boomerang effect here. So, it's one thing to understand that the relationship has evolved, but the policy's got to evolve with it. And U.S. policy, for example, U.S. policymakers should take a very careful look at arms sales. At an even deeper level, we should ask U.S. leaders to ask themselves, why is it that the United States still positions nuclear weapons at Incirlik Air Base in Turkey? That is ultimately reckless on so many levels. Those missiles and those bombs could be seized by terrorists operating in that part of the world. I don't think it's an overreach to say that at some point the Turkish government might try to take possession of them. We don't know what direction Erdogan is heading, but it's certainly not in our direction. So on many, many levels, the relationship is changing, and our policy needs to reflect that. I think we got to cool down on the arms sales, and the time has come, I think, for a careful look at repositioning our strategic arsenal. And there's no need, I think, anymore to have U.S. Nuclear weapons in such a volatile and unstable and ultimately unfriendly nation such as Turkey. So Congress, we think, will play a role in that, and Congress, I think, probably is where that change will start. The administration, a lot of the career people in the State Department, Defense Department, are probably slow to change, and it would be a good thing, I think, for the Congress to kind of spark a discussion on that subject. So here we are. Here, moving on, we have a range of foreign aid priorities, and you can look into our website and under our action alerts and our issue papers. I mean, we kind of cover each of the foreign aid priorities, but I'll just focus on some of the highest priorities. Obviously, we want to see U.S. aid to Armenia continue, particularly economic and technical assistance to help Armenia's economic integration with the world, the strengthening U.S.-Armenia economic relationship. There's a lot of important functions for that assistance program. I'll mention rather later, that we are focused on an aid to trade transition, but there's still important purposes to the U.S. aid program. So that's number one. A second focus, a very serious focus for us, is continued assistance to Nagorno-Karabakh. That aid program has delivered maternal health care to families, clean water to households, and is currently demining farmland and villages across the interior of Artsakh. We'd like to see that assistance continue to finish the work of demining, but also to fund rehabilitation efforts. The Lady Cox rehabilitation program in Stepanakert is a wonderful program, helps more than 1,000 people a year, but unfortunately doesn't have the utilities, doesn't have the facilities that it needs. It operates out of an old kindergarten. It needs a new facility. It needs a better budget. It needs more equipment. They can do wonders, but they need a little bit of help, and that will, we think, be a great avenue for future U.S. assistance, parallel to the demining efforts. A third foreign aid focus, very urgent for us, is U.S. assistance to help Armenia transition refugees from Syria and throughout the Middle East, at-risk minorities, but of course, especially Syrian Armenians. So we're looking for a new home. Our hope would be that they would find that home and a stable future in Hayastan, in Armenia, and the U.S. government can play an important role in that program as well. And those are some of our foreign aid priorities. There are others, as I mentioned, but that's sort of the top three, I would say, is increased aid to Armenia, continued aid to Artsakh, and U.S. support to help settle Syrian Armenians in Armenia itself. Let me move down now to, as I said, our aid to trade transition, which we believe is ultimately the future. Armenia's been the beneficiary of more than $2.5 billion in aid. It's done some important work. Not all of it spent exactly as we would have liked, but nonetheless, important progress has been made on a range of fronts because of that assistance. We appreciate it, every dollar. But we ultimately realize that Armenia's future is not as a recipient of aid. Armenia's future, in terms of the United States, is as a partner. And the economic arena is very fertile area for cooperation. There can be initiatives that create jobs in both countries and create opportunity and hope in the homeland, in Armenia. And so we place a very high premium on the development of U.S.-Armenia economic relations. About a year and a half ago, the United States and Armenia signed a trade agreement. It's called a TIFA, or a trade and investment framework agreement. That's helps facilitate trade between the two countries, investment between the two countries, resolve problems in that relationship. That took place around the same time as the Vorodan hydroelectric power plant deal, which was still to this day the largest ever U.S. investment in a hydroelectric power plant in southern Armenia, in the Sunnik region. Those types of investments, those types of agreements we want to see continued. And three specific examples are, number one, a tax treaty that would eliminate the threat of double taxation, so that if a firm or a company or an enterprise is operating in both jurisdictions, they should not be taxed in both jurisdictions for the same profits. The United States and Armenia have these types of treaties with many, many other countries. We like to see the United States and Armenia negotiate an agreement. We think that with there's certainly the will on the Armenian side, with a little bit of interest and support from the Department of Treasury. We think that can be resolved within 12 to 18 months at the outside. We're also supporting a Millennium Challenge grant for Armenia. Armenia has received such assistance in the past for road building and irrigation. The focus of a new compact or a new agreement that we think would be wonderful is STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. That would help Armenian school kids from elementary school up through college to kind of live and prosper in this new information world, in this new computer and tech world. That type of investment education would bear dividends, literally for generations to come. And a third economic focus for us is direct flights, and starting with direct flights between Yerevan and Los Angeles, two very important and vital centers of the Armenian world. That would be a wonderful start, both for cargo and for passengers, tourism and commerce. This would be a very, very powerful bridge. It would. I've heard it said that this would be like just like Baku Ceyhan for Azerbaijan. This would be like a Baku Ceyhan for Armenia. So those are some of our priorities. I've touched on the genocide issue and Artsakh, regional issues including Turkey, our foreign aid agenda, as well as our economic focus on growing the U.S.-Armenia trade and investment relationship. I'll close in just a moment, but first want to touch on the fact that we're in the middle of confirmation season. So many of President-elect Trump's nominees are up on Capitol Hill today. Jeff Sessions for Attorney General was up on the Hill today, and tomorrow I believe Tillerson, the nominee for Secretary of State, will be going before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. The rest of the week and next week there'll be more hearings as well. These hearings provide an important opportunity for clarity, and senators of both parties ask all sorts of questions, and some of them in person during the hearings, and others in writing. The written questions get responded to before a vote is taken, and so we look to these confirmations, especially the Tillerson confirmation for Secretary of State, as an opportunity to get some clarity on some issues, just some that we're hoping for and looking at. One would be dealing with U.S. policy on the Armenian genocide. I think the relevant question here is there are many ways to ask this question, but some relevant questions would be, aside from Turkey's threats, setting that aside, is there anything else that holds the United States government back from recognizing this known instance of genocide? The answer to that, in our opinion, would be of course not. The only relevant factor shaping U.S. policy of not recognizing the Armenian genocide is the threats and intimidation and bullying of a foreign country. That is a sad conclusion, and I think if we can draw out the Department of State and the new administration on that issue, I think that they would see that it's beneath the dignity of the United States, it's beneath the dignity of the American people to have our stand on human rights, our stand on anything dictated from abroad. We don't outsource our morality, we don't outsource our politics, we don't outsource our policy to anybody, ally or not. Turkey does not deserve a veto, and Turkey should not be allowed to enforce a gag rule on the American people. A question that I've heard asked, and it's actually, I think it's come up in previous Senate hearings, is this. If this is a question that will be asked, it has in fact been asked of a U.S. Nominee to serve as ambassador to Turkey. If Turkey were tomorrow to recognize the Armenian genocide, would the United States then follow suit? So, in other words, if Turkey recognized the genocide tomorrow, would America then do the same? And it's really an interesting question because it leads to two possible answers. The first answer is yes. Yes, if Turkey recognized, then America would too. But what you take from that answer is that, well, why would America have to wait for another country's permission to speak about anything, right? So it kind of shows that U.S. policy is derivative or defined by another party. And then the other answer is no, which comes across, I think, even, or at least equally, awkward or difficult or untenable, which is that, well, even if Turkey were to recognize the Armenian genocide, then the United States wouldn't. So the perpetrator state is willing to come to terms with its history, but America is still in denial of that history. And both answers are untenable and ultimately irrational. And I think the question itself answers itself, which is it says that the U.S. policy should be U.S. policy. Americans should set American policies, and Ankara should have no veto over America. Other questions that I think that we like to see addressed are dealing with Karabakh and our own history as Americans, as a nation founded upon the principle of democratic self-determination. How can we ask for anything less for any other people around the world, and that includes the people of Artsakh. I'd like to see some greater clarity on the role of Armenia. Armenia is offered to serve as a safe haven for Christians and other at-risk minorities in the Middle East. What is it that as Americans we can do? There's been some reluctance, certainly by the incoming president, about accepting refugees from Syria. Well, whatever the merits of that particular argument, there's always a strong case to be made for helping Armenia settle people from that part of the world. There are many Armenians in Iraq and Syria who would like to make a home in Armenia, other Christians as well, as Syrians, Chaldeans, Syriacs, Yezdis, who have a long history in Armenia. These folks could find a home in the future in Armenia, but they need a little bit of help. And Armenia has opened its doors and taken a very, very high percentage of refugees, but it needs help with the means, with the funding and the financing to do as good a job on this as I think Armenia would like to do. Finally, there are serious questions about the U.S.-Armenia economic relationship. We'd like to see some progress on that front as well, hopefully some clarity about what this new administration intends to do in terms of building up the U.S. Armenia partnership. So we'll see how these issues develop over the course of the coming week or 10 days or so. We'll certainly be keeping a close eye on things, staying in touch with our friends up on Capitol Hill. We will turn to you time and time again in the next 24 months. The 115th session of Congress is going to be a very, very pivotal one for the future of the U.S.-Armenia relationship. It is also, we're at a kind of a historic moment, a historic watershed moment in terms of the presidency. We've seen a dramatic shift from President Obama to President-elect Trump. We're not exactly sure where things will head, but we know that there'll be a lot of opportunities along the way. So we just want to put you on notice and then give you a heads up that we will turn to you time and time again. We will, very often have action alerts. Our most recent action alert is right here. And that's anca.org/2017, anca.org/2017. If you visit that website, what you'll find is a single letter that goes to your U.S. Federal legislators. That means your 2 U.S. senators and your single U.S. representative. So 3 federal elected officials will get one letter from you, and that letter will cover an array of issues, all the issues I discussed today, in fact. And ask your legislators to support each of these issues: a just resolution of the Armenian genocide, peaceful resolution of Nagorno-Karabakh, a review of U.S.-Turkey relations, support for our foreign aid priorities, and ultimately and finally support for the growth of the U.S.-Armenia economic relationship. So that one letter will give you an opportunity in very short order to get on record with your member of Congress on each of these issues. We will, in the coming weeks and months, have many, many more action alerts and opportunities for you to weigh in on particular issues, diving deeper into each of our priorities. But for today, we'd like to ask you to please visit anca.org/2017. Get on record early in this session with your U.S. members of Congress, on sort of our top line priorities, and then in the days and weeks to come, we'll turn to you again for more detailed advocacy on other subjects as well. I'm going to wrap up again with, as I often do, with a call for you to stay engaged with the ANCA. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram, Reddit, wherever you like. And we welcome your input. If you ever have ideas, send us a note at ideas@anca.org, ideas@anca.org. Some of our best suggestions have come over that channel. So we always welcome your input, always welcome your ideas. Rely upon your support. We're a grassroots organization. We are as strong as our community, and our community is sort of our anchor and our guide and our North Star. And it's with great appreciation and thanks. If you've come with me today this far, I deeply appreciate your commitment of time and look to you for your support in the coming days and weeks. Please stay in touch. Thanks so much.